Everyone, that's not my slide. Oh, that's why. Everyone, I'm here on behalf of the University of Toronto Formula Racing team. We're a design team here on campus with the university. We build a race car every year to compete with other universities around the world. Looks something like this. Hopefully a lot of you have been able to see it. We have it downstairs in the auditorium right now, so if you haven't seen it already, definitely check it out after. It's designed, obviously, to go racing, and so we've seen tremendous growth over the last few years. We started in 1997, so I think the team is now older than everyone that's on it, and we've now have around 100 or so people that work tirelessly to design, build, test, and ultimately compete with the car, a new car, every single year. Now, every single member of the team, we're all students, all of us. So I emphasize this because, generally speaking, as students, we have no idea what we're doing. And that's a bit of a problem because race cars are pretty complicated things to design. And we do everything ourselves. We do chassis, steering and braking systems, the suspension, battery pack, electric systems, all the circuit boards, all the software, and everything in between. And it all has to come together, and it all has to work, and then it has to move, and then it has to move quickly. And so you might imagine, there's a bunch of students, a bunch of novices. It's kind of a miracle that it comes together every year. And so it begs the question, how do we do it? How do a bunch of students actually go about doing that? How do you start? What does that look like? So how do we build a race car? Now, there's probably some of you are worried I'm about to spend the next 5 or so minutes talking about how an electric motor works or the physics of vehicle dynamics, but I'm not going to do that because that's pretty boring, and a lot of you who are interested in it, you're going to learn that in due time. You don't actually need to talk about that stuff to understand how we build a race car. You don't have to get into the technical details. We just have to get a look at the process and how we go about doing it. So, oh, there you go. Where do we start? So, here you go. There's a good place to start. This is what I saw when I first joined the team. Makes a lot of sense. Got a lot of curves, got a lot of colors going on there. Some more graphs. So I'll give you a second to digest that. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't mean anything. And that's especially what I thought coming into it. And it's a bit overwhelming to see stuff like that. And so I quickly realized, okay, I have absolutely no idea how to build a race car. Certainly not one that's going to go any quickly. And I certainly am beginning to wonder if I know what an engineer even does. And as an engineering student, that's a bit of an existential crisis. So you have to reevaluate this, and this is my harsh introduction to the first step of the process, which is to be humble. It starts with knowing that you suck at something. Because it turns out in order to learn anything, you have to acknowledge that that's the case. And we do this at the beginning of every year. At the beginning, when we're starting a new car design, we look at our previous car and see, okay, what are we bad at? What did we do wrong? What did a bunch of the design judges roast us for? What did we spend a bunch of money where we didn't need to spend money? Did we like how it looked? Did we lose time to other competitors in certain places? How do we make it faster? And so we look at all these and we establish and acknowledge all of the weaknesses that we have. And then from there, you can start to break down the problem into, okay, here's all the problems we want to address, and let's take some steps into addressing them one by one. And that's how we turn kind of the ambiguous and very overwhelming, sometimes paralyzing question of, okay, let's build a race car into something that's actually manageable and something you can actually begin doing. So that's how it starts. That's how the roller coaster of the year begins. And so we jump right into the manufacturing and the design. And so we do all of this ourselves. We have all of our bodywork is being laid up on carbon fiber layups. We do all that ourselves. We weld our own chassis. All of the testing for all of our electronics and our software, steering systems, all of our driverless and autonomous systems, which is something new that we're trying. All of those systems have to come together. And generally speaking, we're just trying to figure out the paces and how we're going to solve kind of the new challenges that we're getting into as we're going through the year. And as you might imagine, this takes a lot of time. tens of thousands of hours across the team, and I'm not exaggerating. It truly is that much time of commitment required to do it. And this is an extracurricular team, which means we're sacrificing our time outside of our social lives, outside of our study time, and sometimes outside of class to make it happen. And so when you're doing this and you're consistently trudging through these problems and you're stumbling through them and you're in this kind of learning stage where things are coming together and falling apart and all of the challenges that we're trying to solve, they're not really showing their heads yet. It really does start to weigh on you. I'm sitting here, it's 3 a.m, this is the 3rd circuit board I've blown up this week. I have a midterm tomorrow. Why do I need to build this car at all? This is a waste of is this even worth my time? So this is the second phase of the year of how we design the car and how we get into building the car. And I would consider it's probably the first roadblock to making something that actually moves, and that's patience. Now, unfortunately for all of us, we don't learn things immediately, and it turns out you do need to give yourself some time to figure that out. And if you don't, then you kind of drop everything before anything happens, and then you really did waste your time. And this is not a non-linear thing, and it's certainly not a straight line. The trajectory is always upwards. This is where as you encounter the failures, this is where we're getting into the process of, okay, things are going wrong, but this is where the meat of it is. This is where all the value of the process is, right? This is where all of the learning's happening. It's where all of the solutions start to take hold. And so it's great when you hit the peaks, but it's really, really not great when things go wrong. Okay, our carbon layup that we talked about it just failed overnight. We have to spend $1,000 to do it again. Fantastic. Our chassis, turns out it's not legal, and we have to redesign it by the end of the week. Great. The school called this morning, and we have no money. Okay, these are all things that over time they start to wear you down, and you'll have big failures and small failures, and this is all kind of part of the process of the year, and this lasts over about 8 months of this. And eventually you start to wonder if there's ever an end to this, and you might start going insane. And that's where we need the third piece of the puzzle here, which is resilience. And that's really just the ability to endure all of that frustration and late nights and things blowing up and money being wasted, things like that from your account as you're doing it. This is all part of resilience. And sometimes that's very easy because, a lot of small things, you can kind of bear that. But sometimes it's a really big failure. Sometimes it's something that completely wipes you off your feet, and you have to start over completely. And in 2022, we made the transition to an electric car. So the car that you have downstairs today it's electric. We used to be a combustion team with an engine. And making that transition was something we really wanted to do because it's a super cool challenge. It allows us to diversify the team. It means that we can pull in a ton of more people from different disciplines in engineering, and it's much more attractive to a much broader audience, and that's great. And there's so many challenges that are more complicated than we used to have to solve, and that's really exciting to do. But in the other hand, it means that you have all of these unknowns that are going to rear their ugly head somewhere down the road. And you don't see that coming necessarily, and that it certainly did. In our first attempt at an electric vehicle, we pushed all the way for 10 months until a few days before the competition, and that car never moved an inch. It never worked. And being able to try to do the reset and then bounce back from that, and during that is tough, but it is necessary. And so we did. We bounced back and we redesigned basically the whole electrical system. And we thought it would get easier because we have the foundations. You have what you need already, and you just have to fix it. Just fix the little things that didn't work. It turns out that's not true. It actually was much harder because that last 10% is really where all the meat of the problems are, and that's the big challenge. And so what we're getting to here is, okay, I'm in this cycle, right, where we've failed already, and we've had to restart. We're now in year 2, and we're continuously trying. Okay, listen, I was humble, I was patient, I'm getting through the failures, but dude, it's been 2 years. This is starting to drive me a little bit crazy. And there's kind of one thing that we're missing in the process here that separates us from making a pile of metal that we have to disassemble and making something that actually moves. And that's split into 2 things. It's confidence and it's responsibility. Now, what does that mean? So while you're doing all this and while you're going through all the things that make you insane, it means that we need to have some kind of hope to at least give us something to come back in for and work towards. And that's what the confidence is. It's not the confidence to say, I know what I'm doing, because you don't. We don't. But it's the confidence to know that we're going to figure it out if we just keep trying. And you have to believe that, or else there's no point in showing up. So we do that. We're like, okay, we know we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out, sure. What does responsibility mean? And this is by far the hardest part of building the car and getting it running, is getting over the hurdle of responsibility. And it's not the responsibility to do your own work, although that is part of it. The big part of it is the responsibility to everyone around you and the responsibility to the group. And because we can't do this alone and we're doing this as a team, the biggest problem is that the car needs to work 100% of the components of the car need to work. And that means if any one component of the car fails, it doesn't move. So if my suspension collapsed tomorrow, it doesn't matter how light my chassis is or how great my battery pack design was or how great my braking system is and anything like that. It doesn't matter. It's not moving. It's not going to do anything. So you lose together, right? And it's not until you recognize that you're actually able to direct yourself in some unified direction. And it's in that understanding that you're able to stomach as a group those big failures, so that instead of pointing fingers and blaming each other and all of the rest of the toxic stuff that comes with doing something like that, you are able to actually come together and say, okay, let's address the problems and do it again. And so we did. In 2023, we went on. The car ran in its first ever test, which was fantastic. I cannot begin to describe the relief that we all felt when that happened. 5 minutes later, the suspension collapsed, but that's not important. We figured it out. And we went on to have the most successful season the team's had in over 15 years. And last year, we came back and won again and have continued that success and that momentum that we had as a result of all of those difficulties that we did and that we went through, especially in 2022. And so when you see the car, that's how we do it. That's it. It's a simple process. It's not an easy one, but it is simple. And that's how we turn what was once a admittedly ridiculous project to try to take on as much as students, an overwhelming project, and that's how we turn it into something that's actually attainable and manageable and something that we can build. And that's why it's here in front of you, downstairs anyway, in the lobby today. And I hope that you look at it and begin to take in and now have a bit more of appreciation and realizing that what that car embodies really is, 1,000 different failures and the work of countless different dedicated students who all were vulnerable, took the responsibility to be vulnerable enough to embrace these challenges and get on the other side and see what happens. And that's what that car represents, and that's what we plan to do again this year. So if you want to build a race car, well, you know where to find us, right? But if you don't, I don't blame you. But there's good news, and the good news is that the process is, if you haven't figured it out yet, it's pretty universal. You can use it for anything. And the point is that you should, at least, if you don't want to build a race car, do try something that you find challenging and you find difficult. And don't be scared when it's something overwhelming and there doesn't seem to be a clear solution in front of you. Have confidence you'll figure it out and be responsible to yourself. And in the end of the day, it's with experience, I think, that you begin to realize that It's the pursuit of these difficult things that they're actually the same thing as pursuing meaningful things, no matter how insane they might drive you. Thanks, everyone.